tears started flowing. He couldn't even hold them back. His hands were still open. But I died for you. I love you. I can help you. I can take care of you. I can give you what you need in life. Won't you come to me? And I'm thinking, come on, what is wrong with you? Tell him yes. You know you want it. And I looked at him and I wanted to. And I told him, Jesus, I want to. I want to come to you. But I don't know how. I thought he would tell me, well, here's what you do. Which he did. But not exactly the way I was expecting. He told me, turn your radio back on. And listen to it. And I will tell you how. Ka-boom! The dream ended. And I was sitting on my bed, holding my radio, like I was when the dream had first started. And I thought, okay, now that was weird. Okay, I know I did not do that to him. I don't think that way. I would never have dreamed that up. And I began to pace my floor wondering, is that really real? Did that really happen? And finally I thought, Becky, you are so stupid. You want to know if it's real? Turn your radio on and listen. I mean, if it's real, you will hear how you can become a Christian. If it isn't real, you've just got a wild imagination, kid. You need to get some slaves. You've got a problem here. You probably get a toothpaste commercial or the latest news, weather, and sports report, but you won't hear how to become a Christian. So I remember reaching out to turn that radio on, and I was shaking because I kept thinking, man, I hope it's real because I really want to be a Christian. And I reached out and I turned that radio on. And as I sat down and listened, oh, I got it. Oh, this is crazy. This is a Voice of Prophecy radio program. My mother used to listen to it, believe it or not. She listened to it when I was growing up, and I recognized the voice, HMS Richards. And when I had turned the radio on the first time, I was getting his opening comments. The second time, I'm getting the closing comments. Shortest sermon I ever heard, opening, closing. Amen. And I, if you're Pastor Jason, you might want to try that sometime. But here's what I heard. No matter how much of a sinner you may think you are, and I know I am bad. No matter how far down in the depths of sin you may have sunk, and I know I am up to my neck in mud and I am about to go under. God loves you. And I was beginning to think that, I think that might be true. It's written in the Bible, in the book of 1 John, chapter 1, verse 9, that if we confess our sins to him, he will forgive us, and he will cleanse us from all our unrighteousness. And I jumped up excited. That's it, that's it. I can't believe it. I thought you had to do some big, almost impossible thing, and it's as simple as confess my sins and be clean. This is incredible. Del Decker came on. If some of you might know who she is, she's a great singer, has a beautiful voice, and I remember, okay, this is why I turned the radio on in the first place. I'm going to listen to some music and get in a good mood. So I'm sitting there thinking, I am now going to get in a good mood. And I don't remember what she was singing. It was beautiful, but I turned the radio off because I was very anxious to start confessing my sins. So I turned the radio off and I knelt down by my bed and I began to pray. Dear Jesus, I know I have done this wrong, and I specifically was naming things that I had done. The words spoken, the disrespect, the unkindness, when I stole those guitar picks and I wish I wouldn't have done it now, would you please forgive me? One by one, I did this, would you forgive me? And I did this too, would you forgive me? And after 4 or 5 confessions, maybe 3 or 4, somewhere in there, I stopped and I thought, okay, I just turned 20 years old 2 days ago. Do you know how many times in 20 years I have sinned? How in the world am I going to remember all of those sins to confess them? And I'm trying to figure it out. You know what? I can't even remember 2 weeks ago until I can't even remember yesterday until now. And I was trying to figure, what do I do? How do I get all this laid out so I can be clean? And everything changed. The dream started again, right where I left off. Jesus was standing in front of me. And I was thinking, okay, I want Jesus, and so I began to pray. No, as I was looking at him, I thought that was wrong. As I'm looking at Jesus, I heard laughter coming behind me, and I kept thinking, what in the world? And I turned, and it was Satan in that blue suit, shining out, the silvery threads shining off of it, and he was laughing at me. And I couldn't figure out what in the world. And then he stopped, and boy, I'll tell you, he shot a flash of hate. He just glared, those eyes, that hate that comes out of him. And he laughed, and then he stopped and he said, you can't remember your sins. And he laughed as if that was just the funniest joke ever, joke of the year. And then he stopped as if he could turn it on and off at his will. And he flashed that hate again. Well, if you don't remember your sins, you can't confess them. And he laughed. And he stopped. You don't confess them. You can't be forgiven. And he laughed as if he really had me on this one. And then he stopped. And then he shot that hate as, oh man, he glared at me as if he could hit me. He would love to just lay me flat. And he looked at me and he said, he cannot have you. You belong to me. You asked me to be your God. Remember the swimming pool? And I thought I had everything to gain and nothing to lose if I were to pray to Satan. I was wrong. And now, as he was throwing it in my face, I was wondering how much more does he have that he can fling at me, that he has kept in his record book with him. And I reacted to that instantly. And I turned to him and I told him, yeah, that's right, Satan, I prayed to you. I asked you to be my God. I never did get that swimming pool that I asked for. In fact, I've never gotten anything I've wanted out of life from you. I don't even want to live anymore. I mean, is this all that you have to offer me is death? Why don't you just shut up and let me make up my own mind? Have you ever said something kind of wish you would have thought a little bit more first? This was one of those moments. I knew I was in trouble. As soon as those words come out, his face turned red. He was mad. And I saw his hand clench into a fist. And he started bringing it back, and I thought, oh man, this guy is going to punch my lights out. I am dead meat. And as he backed up with his hand, he looked at Jesus. Jesus didn't say anything. And then he looked back at me, and it's kind of like I would love to punch you, but you got your big brother there protecting you. You know, I mean, he was mad, and he knew. He had to be careful. And he looked back at Jesus. Jesus did not say anything to him. But it seemed by the way Jesus moved his head, there was a silent command given there. Back off. You let her choose. Ooh, he was mad. He turned, just mumbling. Remember those sounds I described coming out of my mother? I'm hearing them again, only they're coming out of him. And as he turns and he's walking behind me, I saw, as I watched him, there were trees behind me. I didn't know that because I'd always been looking forward. But as I turned and saw these trees, there were angels coming out from behind these trees. And they were coming and gathering around with him. And I knew, these are Satan's angels, angels in rebellion, as the Bible would call them, fallen angels from heaven. And they were gathered around in support, in unity with Satan, and they're mumbling and whispering things to each other as they're looking at me. That's not a good feeling that I had there. But I turned and I looked and I saw Jesus, and above Jesus, they had been there the whole time, I didn't see it until now, was actually there were angels hovering above Jesus. And I knew they were there for him, on his side, in his support. And then it dawned on me, oh, great. I am in the middle. And I heard a voice telling me, Becky, you have to make a decision here. And there isn't anybody here who can influence you to go one way or the other. You may never have this opportunity again. Now you can continue to live your life as you have been living it and let Satan be your God. Or you can take a chance that God really does love you. And he can help you. And he can take you in life. Who would you like to to be your God? Do you want Jesus, or do you want Satan? I did not have to think very long on that one. I had done years of thinking. I knew what I wanted. I want Jesus. And I had turned to face Jesus, and he was gone. He disappeared, and I panicked. You lost your opportunity again. You took your eyes off of him. Now he's gone. You looked away. And I panicked, thinking, I cannot believe this. I wasted my chance again. Where in the world did he go? And I'm looking, trying to figure what in the world. And I heard a voice tell me, look further ahead and look up higher. And as I looked further ahead and I looked up higher, I saw there was a hill. And on that hill, lifted up high, there was a cross. And on that cross was Jesus. And there was light coming off of the cross. It was all dark around the cross. It looked like black fog. We have fog in this world, and it's white fog, but this was a black, thick fog. And as the light come off of the cross, and I was looking and my eyes adjusted, I could see up above the cross, all around Jesus, there were angels. And those angels were crying. And they were crying so hard. Their bodies were shaking because they were sobbing so hard. I saw two angels try to give each other a hug to comfort one another, and they just let go and turned away crying, and they dropped down on the ground. They were crying so hard. There was no comfort for their grief. And these angels, as they looked at Jesus on the cross, Jesus did not look back. He did not respond to them. And I realized he couldn't respond because he was dead on the cross. And these angels, as they looked, they came and looked further down at the foot of this hill, at the bottom of the hill. There were more angels on the ground, and these angels were dark angels. They were not black, but there's that black fog stuff around them. There's still a light that come off of these angels, but there was a darker, very dim light, like you have flashlights with low batteries, and you get a dim light. But these angels above were just bright, shining. These ones shined, but not as bright. And as the angels above looked at the angels down at the foot of the cross, they didn't say anything, but I could hear their thoughts as the angel heard my thoughts earlier. And this is what they were in their minds. They were screaming as they were crying, looking at the angels down on the ground. You killed my best friend. And they're crying, you killed him. You killed him. I can't believe you would do that. How could you do such a thing? He was my best friend. And they were crying, and the angels on the ground did not even look at those angels above. They were looking at Jesus on the cross, and I saw just absolute terror in their eyes. They were scared, very scared, and they're shaking their heads looking at Jesus, and all they would say was, oh no, oh no, oh no. And I realized what had happened. I knew in my dream. These angels knew that in killing Christ, they had sealed their own destiny. They knew for them justice would be given. And it was only a matter of time they would get what they had given. And they were going to die. In the future, they knew it. And they were scared. And they were terrified. And as I looked again at Jesus on the cross, I'm thinking, okay, he's on the cross, and those are my sins. My sins. I want Jesus. I want to be clean. And so I tried to go. I'm going to go to the cross. I want Jesus. And as I tried to walk toward him, I could only take a couple steps, and there was a heavy weight shoved me down on the ground, so I was on my hands and knees. Okay, fine. If I have to crawl on my hands and knees, I will. I want Jesus. And I tried crawling toward him, but again, that weight was so heavy, it shoved me down, and I was flat on my stomach on the ground. And I knew that weight was actually all of my sins, the whole lifetime of sins, pressing and pressing me down, trying to hold me back. And I thought, okay, if I have to scoop on my belly like a snake, I will. I want Jesus. I want Jesus. And I tried to pull myself through the dirt. I just couldn't move. It was so heavy, and I just laid on the ground, and I cried. And I cried, and I cried. I cried myself dry until I couldn't cry anymore. And good night. I want Jesus. I want to be clean. I want to be a Christian. And as I looked up, Jesus was standing in front of me again. And he had those hands opened up as he did before. And I thought, whatever you do, don't you even take your eyes off of him this time. Don't even blink. You know, because I was afraid he might disappear again, and there would go my chance. And I didn't know if I'd ever get it again. And so I began, just in desperation, I started pouring myself out. Jesus, I want you. I want you. I want to come to you, but I can't. I have too many sins. Please, would you come to me? Would you forgive me for all the sins that I have done, deliberately knowing they were wrong? I knew I was wrong when I did it, and I didn't care then, but I do care now, and I am sorry. Please, would you forgive me? And then just to make sure I had everything, please, Jesus, would you forgive me for any sins I've done, not knowing. I didn't know it was wrong, and it was done in innocence, but I'm still sorry. Please, would you forgive me? Would you come to me? Can I be yours? Because I knew I couldn't go to him. The angels above Jesus started to sing, and another angel held up his hand. No, wait. Everything went quiet. And the angel told them, he hasn't answered her yet. Oh, man. All focus was on Jesus, except me. I was looking down. I was too afraid to look at him. I was scared. You know, what is he going to say? I would love to forgive you. Had your chance. It's too late now. I'm sorry. Is he going to say, well, I would love to forgive you, but you have too many sins. I'm sorry. Is he going to say, I would forgive you, but this one is the unpardonable sin. You have committed it. I'm sorry. What is he going to say? And I stood there afraid to look, but after so long I was getting uncomfortable, so I finally started to look up. As soon as I saw his eyes, I knew there was hope. There's hope. And Jesus was smiling. And that love that he had, this just indescribable love that you can't even put it into words. No human in this world has ever shown me the kind of look of love that I saw in the eyes of Jesus. And Jesus, as he smiled, he said, I will. I forgive you. The angel let down his hand. All the angels began to sing. I mean, they were high-fiving each other. They were hugging each other. Some of the angels had dropped to their knees. Their hands were lifted up in praise. And it's interesting because I noticed they were not praising Jesus. All the praise was ascending up to the throne. The Holy Father praising him for Jesus, the gift of salvation. Another sinner has been brought home. And as they sang and they hugged each other, some double high-fived and they pulled each other in for a hug. And while all that singing was dancing around and the praising, and they're flat on the ground with their hands straight out, praising the Holy Father. And I remember reading those scriptures. You know, there is joy in all of heaven over one sinner. That's me. And you guys, if you have accepted Jesus, they have sung their praises over you as well. God loves you immensely. He's bigger than creation. I mean, he loves us bigger than this world. But Jesus had dropped to his knees in front of me, and we're now eye to eye. And he took my shoulders and he pulled me in, and he hugged me and he cried on my shoulders, and I cried on his. And Jesus, after he held me and hugged me and cried for a while, he looked at me, he pulled me back, and he said, you belong to me now, and I will never let you go. And I remember thinking, that's okay, as he pulled me back in and hugged me, and he's crying while the angels are singing and dancing around, and I'm whispering in his ears, I don't want you to let me go. I don't ever want to go back. I don't want to go back. And I knew in my heart, if I wanted to, Jesus would not force me to stay with him, because love does not force. Love allows us the freedom to choose, and he will respect if I don't want to be with him. I would rather die with Satan. He's going to give me what I want, even though it hurts him and makes him cry. He will respect, because love is respect. But he held me for a while, and I saw, as I was crying on his shoulders, I saw Satan turn with his angels. And they started walking away, mumbling to each other, and I knew he's coming back. He's going to make his plans on how he can try to get me to come back onto his side again. I knew he would be coming back. But as he walked away mumbling, and I was wrapped in the arms of Jesus, and he's crying on my shoulders, the dream ended, and everything changed, and there I was kneeling at my bed, as I was when the dream first began. And so that for me was a step into a brand new life with Christ. The first thing I did is I went to my family and told them. I sat my mom and dad down and said, because it's 2 days off, I've got some time here. Instead of killing myself, I'm now going out to tell my family, I've become a Christian. And from now on, these are the exact words, from now on, Jesus is going to be my God, not Satan. And I waited for my parents to respond. My mother spoke first. And this is exactly what she told me. Well, if that's what you want, then don't bother coming around here because I don't want anything to do with Jesus. And if that's what you want, I don't want anything to do with you either. I don't need anybody bringing that stuff around here, shoving that stuff down my throat. I don't want to see it. I don't want to hear it. And I thought, okay, that didn't surprise me. It didn't feel good, but I knew whose spirit was actually speaking through her at that moment. And so I didn't totally take it to heart, even though it didn't make me feel very good. But I looked at my dad wondering, what is he going to say? He didn't say anything much to my surprise. He just looked at me and I could see that look in his eyes. Well, Becky, what are you going to do with this? And I was wondering, what am I going to do? Finally, I decided, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to live the Christian life in such a way my family will see life with Jesus is so much better than the life you have without him. And hopefully that life will be an influence that will pull them in onto God's side. So that's what I chose to do. I never preached at my family. I'm gonna open it up for questions here in just a little bit, but I already know there's 2 questions that you guys are thinking because it gets asked everywhere I go. First one is, whatever happened to your mother? Did she ever come out of all of that spiritualistic stuff? So here's what happened. 2 years after I had been a Christian, I had stopped by to visit with my mom, and nobody else was around. And I love how God works. I mean, he's right on. He knows what he's doing. But my mother began to ask me some questions about God and his grace. Okay, now if they are asking, they are ready to listen. She's seen enough to know there's something in there, and I'd like to know a little bit more here. When they're asking, I have no problem answering them. That's a golden opportunity. So I began to talk to my mother about God, his grace, his mercy, his forgiveness, how good God really is. And she was responding. I mean, she was leaning forward as I talked. I could tell she was really hanging on what I was saying. And so since things were going so well, I figured I'll take it a little further and see how this one goes. So I talked to her about her Ouija board, the tarot cards, all the different stuff that she had, all of her encyclopedia books on the worship of Satan. And I told her, you know how bad these are, how dangerous they are. Why don't you get rid of them? And I asked her for permission if I could take all of her stuff. She hesitated at first, and I could tell there was a real spiritual warfare going on there. I knew there was a battle going on. And as she hesitated, finally she said, okay, you can have it. So boom, I took up the stairs and I started bringing boxes and boxes of all of this stuff that she had, all of these books, magazines, the tarot cards, and all the stuff, and I began to rip it up. And I asked her, hey, Mom, why don't you join me? Come on, help me out here. And that's okay, I'll watch. And so I'm ripping up her books. And finally she grabbed some and actually started to help me rip them up as well. And I watched as her face changed from the tense struggle into being relaxed and happy, and she helped me rip up all these books. When you take these books and you rip them up, I mean, I'll tell you what, the encyclopedias that she had, each one was about 12 inches tall, 2 or 3 inches thick, and there was 40 to 45 volumes. And when I say that from A to Z in the worship of Satan in graphic detail, that gives you an idea what I'm talking about. I mean, that's how many books that she had in the worship of Satan that she helped me rip up. And when you rip them up, they get smaller. I had 3 of those great big dark green garbage bags full of ripped up books. And then she was still happy and things were going well, so why not go a little bit farther? And, if you're going to sucker, you might as well get them good, right? Only instead of books this time for Jesus, it was books on the devil's side. But she gave me permission to take her Ouija board as well, which after we put that Bible on the Ouija board and we went through that experience where I saw the power of God is actually stronger than the power of Satan. She couldn't get that Ouija board to work again until, I think it was 4 years later, she went back and it finally would start to work for her again, so she went back to that. That was her primary source of communicating with Satan and the spirits on the dark side. And so she gave me permission to take the Ouija board as well. So I ran into her bedroom, grabbed it, and come out in front of her, just as close as I am with Pastor Jason, and I broke it up in front of her and put that in the garbage bags as well. And I sat down to talk to her briefly. I knew I was going to take them out and burn them. I was not going to throw them away for fear somebody else would get their hands on them. And even one page I knew was deadly and what it could lead into. And I did not want anybody else to have an opportunity to fall into the trap that my mother fell into. And so she's sitting on the couch and she's looking at me and she said, I still owed over $500 on those books. Good night. She started buying those things when I was 15 years old. I mean, 5 years of payments and she still owes over $500. How much money did she spend on those things? I had no idea. I thought they were paid for. But the fact that she willingly, knowing she owed money, volunteered to help me rip them up and get rid of them. I sat there thinking, that is a victory for Jesus. And I know the enemy is not very happy about this. Oh man, talk about a victory for Jesus. I was just thrilled when I heard that. But I took everything out to the state park and I burned it. And I remember it was nighttime, nobody was around, I was alone, and it was by a river, and I knelt down, the Columbia River, and I knelt down and was praying as these things were burning and telling God, really, I'm nothing. I mean, it's amazing that you would love a sinner like me. I don't have anything to offer you except me, for whatever that's worth. But if you can do anything with me that would touch the lives of somebody else and make a difference for them, to help you in your kingdom, to draw people into your kingdom and your love, I'm willing, I'm available. But my mother eventually, people kept telling me, Becky, you've got to write a book. I mean, I don't even tell the whole story with the guy. I don't have time. But there's incredible lessons I learned about God in the midst of all of this spiritualistic stuff, which is, how can you learn about God when somebody's involved in witchcraft and seances and things, but God is there. There's nobody so tight in Satan's grasp. Satan is powerful, but God is the almighty God who is fully capable of prying those fingers off of that victim and setting the captive free. And so my mother, I felt impressed as I was thinking about writing a book. I heard God tell me, Becky, you need to go see your mother. There's some information she has that you need for writing a book. Okay, so I went to see her, and I did not know she would be dead within 3 weeks. I did not know that. But I sat down with her and began to visit, and again, it's interesting. Nobody was around. It was just the two of us. And I began to ask her some questions on, what made you give all this up? Here's what she said. Do you remember that day when you came to my house and we were talking about God and I gave you permission to take all of my stuff? And I said, yeah, I remember that. And she started getting kind of antsy, and I knew what was happening. There was a spiritual warfare going on behind the scenes. We're always being watched. Even though we can't see the angels or Satan, they're always watching. They're there. And she told me, well, I heard this voice in my head. I never told anybody this, but this voice I heard, I've never heard it before, and this is what the voice said. Susie, you know this stuff is deadly, it's dangerous, and you know it isn't good. And you know you don't really want it. Why don't you say yes and get rid of it? And she said, I don't know why, but I listened to that voice. I knew it was right. I agreed. I knew it was deadly. I knew it was dangerous. And so I gave you permission to take stuff. Do you remember? Yes, I remember that. Well, there's something I never told anybody, and she's scratching herself and getting all just agitated and upset. And she said, well, do you remember you took my Ouija board? Yeah. Okay, well, I went to my closet a few days later to get something, and I saw my Ouija board was there again.